Here's something strange about money. The people who worry about it the most are often the ones least likely to look at it. Not because they're careless, because they care. And that one reflex, not looking, quietly costs the average household somewhere between $700 and $1,100 a year. No overspending required. Sunday night, you're on the couch, your phone is right next to you. You know you should check the account. The credit card statement closed this week. The savings balance hasn't been reviewed in a month. You open your phone, you open something else instead. Somewhere in that statement, a charge is still running that you don't remember signing up for. It wasn't a decision, it was a reflex. You're not alone in this, and you're not irresponsible for doing it. But there is a name for what just happened, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Financial avoidance is not a discipline problem. It is not a character flaw. It is a designed loop. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do when it detects an uncertain threat. And, in certain moments, your bank account reads as exactly that. In this video, I'm going to show you why avoidance happens to careful, responsible people, what it's actually costing you in dollars, and the system that breaks the loop without requiring willpower. If you've watched a lot of finance content, you've probably noticed that most of it assumes you're already looking. It assumes you're tracking, reviewing, optimizing. But there's a meaningful portion of financially responsible adults who earn decent money, pay their bills, save when they can, and still have an uncomfortable relationship with actually checking where they stand. Not because they don't care, because caring is exactly what makes looking feel dangerous. What makes this particular trap expensive is that it's invisible. You're not spending wrong. You're not investing wrong. You're just not seeing clearly. And the decisions you make without clear visibility are almost always worse than the decisions you'd make with it. This video is for anyone who has ever opened the banking app and immediately closed it again. And, if that's you, notice what it isn't. It isn't laziness. Lazy people don't feel the pull to check in the first place. It isn't stupidity. You understand the numbers fine, and that's part of why looking feels loaded. What you're carrying is the specific discomfort of someone who cares about a thing and has quietly lost easy contact with it. You're not broken, but you do need to understand what's running. The most common belief about financial avoidance is this: I avoid because I feel guilty, and I feel guilty because I've been doing something wrong. This belief sounds logical, and for some people in specific situations, there's a grain of truth. If you just overspent and you know it, looking at the result feels punishing. But here's where the belief breaks down. Most people who struggle with avoidance are not reckless spenders. They're the opposite. They're people who care deeply about money, who have the 401k set up, who pay on time, who have thought about a budget more than once. For them, avoidance isn't happening because they're bad with money. It's happening precisely because they care about money, and the uncertainty feels threatening. That's not a character story. That's a brain story. And that difference isn't a technicality. It decides what actually fixes it. If avoidance were a character flaw, the cure would be more shame and more effort. If it's a brain response, shame is fuel, not medicine. It makes the very thing it's trying to correct worse. Almost everything later in this video depends on getting that one distinction right, and it has a mechanism. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain has a threat response system designed to protect you from danger. When it detects something uncertain and potentially harmful, it activates avoidance behavior, steering you away before you've consciously decided anything. This happens fast, faster than logic. By the time the thought, I should check my account, has finished forming, the decision not to has often already been made somewhere underneath it. That's why willpower feels so useless here. You're not losing an argument with yourself. You're showing up after the argument is already over. In most of life, this system is protective. You don't put your hand near a flame. You don't walk into a situation your gut says is wrong. But the brain does not reliably distinguish between physical threats and emotional ones. In plain language, your nervous system treats an uncertain account balance the same way it treats a snake in the grass. Behavioral researchers call this financial avoidance. Shapiro and Burchell documented that people with anxious orientations toward their finances are significantly more likely to avoid engaging with them. Consumer surveys put the rate at 22% of adults overall, rising to 28% among millennials and 33% among Gen Z. The people who care enough to be anxious, the people who have something to lose. This is what I call the shame loop. The shame loop. It works like this. You feel uncertain about money. The brain avoids the uncertain thing. Because you avoided, you know less. Because you know less, you feel more uncertain, and the avoidance deepens. And here's what makes it so hard to see. It doesn't feel like a loop. It feels like logic. If I look, I'll just feel worse. That thought feels rational, but it's not logic. That's the loop talking. In a few minutes, I'll show you the actual cost of this loop, the number that most people who avoid their accounts never see. Let me give you a specific person. Rachel is 39. She earns $82,000 a year. Take home around $4,500 a month after taxes and deductions. She has a 401k she contributes to. She has a savings account. She pays her bills on time. She is genuinely responsible. She hasn't looked carefully at her credit card statement in 4 months. Not because she can't afford the payment. It's set to autopay. Not because she's running up debt recklessly. She uses the card for groceries and gas and mostly stays current. But the last time she looked, there were 3 charges she didn't recognize. She told herself she'd deal with them. She didn't. Now, 4 months have passed, and looking doesn't just mean seeing a balance. It means seeing that she didn't deal with the charges. It means seeing evidence of the avoidance itself. So she doesn't look. Meanwhile, the card has an annual fee she forgot about. There's a streaming service she canceled last year that never actually stopped charging. And one of the 3 unrecognized charges, $67, is still recurring. None of this is catastrophic individually. Together, over 4 months of not looking, it has cost Rachel approximately $420 in spending she didn't consciously choose. This is not after bad spending. This is before bad spending even has a chance to happen. Rachel's situation maps a concept I call the avoidance tax, the measurable financial cost of not engaging with your accounts. The avoidance tax has 4 components. Together, they add up faster than most people expect. Component 1, untracked recurring costs. A 2022 C+R research survey found that people estimated their monthly subscription spend at $86 on average. But when walked through category by category, their actual total was $219. That is a 61% underestimate. More than 2.5 times what they thought. At just $50 per month in untracked recurring charges, well below the average gap, that is $600 per year. Component 2, preventable fees and interest. According to the Federal Reserve's G19 Consumer Credit Report, the average APR on credit card accounts actively carrying a balance was 22.15% as of Q2 2026. For a household carrying a $3,000 revolving balance at that rate, not tracking the balance costs approximately $665 per year in interest alone, on a balance that a fully engaged household might have paid down months earlier. Component 3, Insurance and savings decisions never made. Premiums never shopped because shopping requires reviewing. Savings rates never adjusted because adjusting requires looking. Taking the three measurable components together, forgotten subscriptions, preventable fees and interest, and overdraft or late fees, the avoidance tax for a financially disengaged household falls in the range of 700 to 1,100 plus per year in directly traceable costs. That is before accounting for insurance never shopped and savings rates never adjusted. The invisible component that has no clean price tag but compounds for decades. If the $600 per year from untracked charges alone had been invested instead, $50 per month, compounded at the historical average annualized return of approximately 7% over 20 years. That becomes roughly 26,000. Over 10 years of documented components alone, 7,000 to 11,000 in value that left without a decision ever being made. And here is what makes that number worth sitting with. It is not the result of bad choices. It is the result of no choices. The shame loop makes not looking feel safer than looking. And the avoidance tax is what accumulates in that gap. Why does the shame loop persist in otherwise careful, intelligent people? 3 reasons. They work together. First, uncertainty feels worse than a known bad outcome. Behavioral economists call this ambiguity aversion. And it is a baseline human tendency, not something that only kicks in under stress. The Ellsberg paradox, documented in 1961, showed that people consistently prefer a bet with a known probability over one with an unknown probability, even when the expected value is identical. Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory extended this in 1979. Financial anxiety amplifies a preference that was already there. Put plainly, your brain would rather sit with a vague bad feeling than confirm a specific one, because the specific one can't be unknown. A fuzzy worry still leaves room for hope. A number on a screen closes that room, so the mind quietly protects the hope by refusing the number. Knowing your balance is low feels better than not knowing what it is, but getting to knowing requires one moment of uncertainty, walking through the door. The brain avoids the door, not the room behind it. Second, avoidance is reinforced every time it works. When you close the app without looking, the anxiety decreases. Temporarily. That relief is a signal your brain learns from. Not looking, relief. Behavior repeats. This is a conditioning loop. It does not require bad character to run. It just requires a brain. Third, the shame of past avoidance compounds. The longer you haven't looked, the more loaded looking becomes. You're no longer just checking a balance. You're confronting the entire duration of not having checked. Every month of avoidance makes the next look feel heavier, even when the actual numbers haven't gotten worse. This is why just be more disciplined doesn't work. Discipline doesn't touch any of these 3 mechanisms. It just adds one more thing to feel bad about when the behavior continues. Here is what actually breaks the shame loop. It comes down to one core principle. Make looking easier than not looking. You're not building a discipline habit. You're building a visibility habit. These are different problems with different solutions. Step 1. Pick one number to check. Start with the smallest act of financial engagement that still counts. Not reviewing every transaction. Not rebuilding the budget. This. Once a week, for 5 minutes, you look at one number. Pick the number that creates the most anxiety. That is the one running the loop. For most people, it is the checking account balance or the credit card balance. Not both. 1. Open the app. See the number. Close the app. That is your only job for the first month. Step 2. Remove every layer of friction from looking. The app should be on your home screen. The login should be biometric, not a password you have to recall. The brain uses friction as evidence that a behavior is hard. Reduce friction, and the perceived threat shrinks before you've done anything else. Step 3. Decouple looking from acting. The most common mistake is trying to look and fix simultaneously. That loads too much onto the act of looking. Looking becomes the entry point to an obligation, and the brain routes around it. Separate them. Looking day is looking day. Action day is a different calendar block, a different commitment. When looking is just looking, the resistance drops. Step 4. Observe without verdict. When you look and find the charge you forgot about, the script that runs in most people's heads is, I should have caught that sooner. Replace it with, there is a $14 charge. I will decide what to do with it on Thursday. Observation. Not verdict. Not confession. This distinction is the difference between looking, feeling like accountability, and looking feeling like punishment. Accountability you can sustain. Punishment you avoid. Step 5. Let the system be boring. The goal of this weekly check is not transformation. It is contact. Regular, undramatic contact with your actual numbers. After a few months of consistent contact, the uncertainty that drives the shame loop diminishes. Not because the numbers are better, sometimes they're the same, but because you know them, and knowing removes the threat signal that started the loop in the first place. Notice that none of these 5 steps asks you to care more or try harder. You already do both, and it hasn't helped. Every one of them works by lowering what looking costs, not by raising what you can force yourself to spend. That is the whole shift. You are not repairing the person, you are redesigning the moment. Here is the reframe. The shame loop tells you avoidance is a character story. That not looking is evidence of who you are. Someone who can't handle money, someone falling behind, someone whose financial life is too messy to face. It is not. It is a wiring story. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do with uncertain, aversive information. You are not the problem. The loop is the problem. And, unlike character, a loop can be interrupted. You do not have to become a different person. You have to make that weekly look slightly easier than not looking, and do it often enough that the brain updates its threat assessment. The people who have built financial clarity did not do it through superior character. They did it by removing the conditions that made avoidance feel rational. That is the quiet good news in all of this. You do not have to wait until you become more disciplined, because discipline was never the missing piece. The conditions are the piece, and conditions are the one thing you can change this week in about 5 minutes. You're not bad with money. You've been avoiding your money. Those are different problems. Only one of them is yours to solve. If this video gave you a clearer picture of why avoidance happens and what it's actually costing, the most useful thing you can do right now is subscribe. The next video in this series covers the second most expensive money trap responsible adults walk into, the one that doesn't feel like a trap at all, because every decision inside it was correct. You're building a real picture. Let's keep going.